Negotiations between the United States and Iran appear to have hit a blockade, if not a complete failure point, as Vice President Vance departed Sunday afternoon after 21 hours of negotiations with the Iranians from Pakistan. So he's on his way back to the United States. We're going to talk about those negotiations, what we can discern from it, what's going on inside Iran, the Strait of Hormuz, and just some updates with Operation Epic Fury. Let's first open with Vice President Vance and what he had to say about those negotiations.
We have been at it now for 21 hours. And we've had a number of substantive discussions with the Iranians. That's the good news. The bad news is that we have not reached an agreement. And I think that's bad news for Iran much more than it's bad news for the United States of America. So we go back to the United States having not come to an agreement. We've made very clear what our red lines are, what things we're willing to accommodate them on, and what things we're not willing to accommodate them on. And we've made that as clear as we possibly could. And they have chosen not to accept our terms.
Okay, so that's pretty straightforward. Iran is not budging on the terms the United States has outlined. I do find this interesting. If we remove all the politics, thoughts, and feelings around this, and we just really look at it from a military standpoint, Iran has been hammered. Now, the U.S. and allies obviously have taken their licks that are not insignificant. So I'm not discounting that at all. However, from the position of power here, you would think Iran at some point would just be crying uncle. Maybe their perception is they still have a power play move, which it seems like the Strait of Hormuz has really been that power play, the amount of oil that flows through there, hoping that they can pressure the global community to have this ease up so they can get their way. It's an interesting thought process to run through. I'd be curious to get your thoughts. Now, and again, when we go with that, we just look at what has been hit from Operation Epic Fury. Now, this is about a week old. But remember, we are under a ceasefire here for the last 48 hours or so. 13,000 plus targets, 155 plus Iranian vessels have been destroyed. Just hammering away. We've obviously covered it on this channel. And if you're watching this, you've undoubtedly been consuming this type of content. So you've just seen the blitzkrieg that Iran has faced. Again, I'm not discounting the fact that they have slung a lot of iron towards the Gulf states, U.S. bases, and everything in between. And they've had a couple home runs. They've had a couple doubles. They've had a couple triples. Again, not to be discounted, but nonetheless, they've been hammered away. Their entire leadership chain, more or less, has been eliminated. So when it comes to negotiations, it is interesting that they are still digging in. So take that for what it's worth. Now, President Trump was asked leaving the White House this morning what he thought on it. And this is a clip from President Trump. Appears to be getting ready to get on to Marine One, as you can hear this in the background.
Look, regardless, we win. Regardless what happens, we win. We totally defeated that country. And so let's see what happens. Maybe they make a deal, maybe they don't.
So President Trump really saying it makes no difference to him whether Iran makes a deal or not, that things are going good for the United States and Iran is being decimated, which, you know, I don't disagree with him when it comes to that. If you just, again, look at how much has been hammered away in that country, it would make it pretty challenging. Now, where those peace talks appear to have really broken down when it comes to the nuclear aspect of this, where they refuse to commit to not developing a nuclear weapon. That's always been a red line for the United States. They have about 440 kilograms of uranium that's enriched to 60%. So enough for 9 weapons. If they continue to further process that, supposedly that would take about a week or 2 weeks. I know that tends to be a meme or a joke that Iran is always 2 weeks away from a nuclear weapon. Regardless, the enrichment piece is a red line for the United States. Iran also wanted $6 billion in frozen assets released for war damages to compensate for the Hormuz tolls and everything that's, again, them just being hammered away there. And they also insisted that Israel halt operations inside Lebanon, which we have seen Israel continue to conduct operations inside Lebanon since the ceasefire, a little bit of smatterings. Like, it wasn't just a clean into all of this. So Iran is obviously digging in on this. Now, in response to all of these failures, President Trump then came out and said that the U.S. will blockade the Strait of Hormuz after the talks failed. He said the United States Navy would immediately begin blockading the Strait of Hormuz, instructing forces to destroy Iranian mines and interdict vessels paying tolls to Iran. President Trump did not signal immediate resumption of a full-scale war with these failures of the talks. However, he warned that the military stands locked and loaded and is ready to finish up the little that's left of Iran if they interfere. Neither the United States nor Iran indicated what follows the 14-day ceasefire expiration, which occurs on April 22nd. So again, we're going to continue marching towards that deadline. Maybe we'll see if there's a re-energization, is that a word, of this whole process again. There's also an interesting article inside the Wall Street Journal this morning, which this is actually Saturday's Wall Street Journal, saying that the missile threat inside Iran is still pretty strong, that Iran still has thousands of ballistic missiles in its arsenal, and it could use these by retrieving the launchers from underground storage areas. And this is coming from American officials familiar with intelligence agencies' assessments. So whether that's true or not, I mean, I think it is fair to make the assumption that they still have a lot of ballistic missiles and potentially drones, and the potential that they will be resupplied via an underground railroad, a black market of sorts. And I will continue to use this analogy when it comes to Strait of Hormuz and things. I still think, the United States, it has to win. The Gulf states have to win with perfection. One errant drone, a foul ball, a double, a single, a home run, if you're able to hit a tanker, really puts a stranglehold on trade flowing through there. If you're always uneasy, if your ship is going to make it through, do you really have the ability to conduct free trade through the Strait of Hormuz? Which dives into the Strait of Hormuz piece, which the U.S. has now sent 2 warships to transit through the Strait of Hormuz. Now, they did this on Saturday. 2 Navy-guided missile destroyers, they transited the Strait of Hormuz to begin mine-clearing operations. Now, relatively early in this operation, about a week or so in, I think the United States was saying that basically all of Iran's mine-laying vessels were completely decimated. So all 28 of them are laying at the bottom of the sea, according to President Trump. And if we jump over to the Institute for the Study of War, they put out an article which, again, it highlights Iran's usage of the Strait of Hormuz and strangling this key choke point that has about 20 million barrels of oil that used to flow through it each and every day. Now, it appears they just more or less sporadically mined this strait. And that's really all they had to do. That kind of goes back to the analogy of you just have to get one drone through in order to threaten the free trade through here. But by sending these destroyers through the Strait of Hormuz, the U.S. is trying to undermine Iran's ability to threaten and to control this critical choke point. Ultimately, if you're able to open up the strait, that's a big win for the global economy, and this is a big lever that the Iranians can no longer pull. Getting it to a point where you can control that and ensure free trade and flow through it, obviously, I think is a much more challenging thing than most people want it to be, but it is what it is. Now, I was trying to find the video clip earlier, and I do apologize. There is some VHF video of what is supposedly an IRGC Navy member threatening any ship transiting the Strait of Hormuz and giving warning that anyone should stay away from any warship by at least 10 nautical miles because they could be fired upon at any point. So Iran, at least people are speaking on the radio. That's a far cry from actually doing anything. But, again, it shows that at least some of these guys haven't given up. Now, what can a radio do versus a missile or a drone? Not much. They didn't appear to take any action from it, from what that's worth. But nonetheless, you can see that they're not quite giving up. And the fact that they basically give a big metal finger to negotiations shows that they're not done with this. At least I don't think so, at least not as of Sunday, April 12th. Now, on a somewhat related note, but unrelated note, plane spotters captured this KC-135 landing at RAF Mildenhall, I guess yesterday afternoon, early this afternoon. And notice it's just speckled with lots of white little marks on here. The assumption being that this is potential repair damage from shrapnel, etc., that it endured at Prince Sultan Air Base in Saudi Arabia earlier this month. Now, again, you can see lots of patches on here. There is a relatively robust aircraft maintenance team that the Air Force can deploy to Frankenstein and put jets back together again. I would assume that's the team that's doing this. If this is actually shrapnel damage has been patched up, you really got a lot going on here. And I have my maintainers in the crowd and engineers can throw spears here. I fully appreciate that if this is actual damage to the fuselage of this plane, the pressure vessel of this plane, obviously that's significant. I have been around operations where C-130 scrapes a tail. It has to do a one-time flight waiver below 10,000 feet because it can't pressurize to get the plane to a major level depot facility where they can do heavy maintenance on it. This thing looks like it has chicken pox on it, which again is pretty impressive if we're talking about if these were actually punctures into the fuselage and they had to patch this up. And they did it in a combat zone, right? In a combat zone that they're diving into bunkers all the time. So if they actually got this plane out from the damage we saw occur at Prince Sultan Air Base just a little while ago, that's pretty impressive. Now, again, this is coming from open source internet. It would be relatively odd to see a plane like this landing at Mildenhall, and given everything that's transpired, it doesn't seem too far-fetched if that's the case. So again, that's pretty impressive if we're getting a plane flying that has sustained that type of damage so quickly. Now, granted, there's some other planes like the Puddle, if you watched our previous video, that's probably never flying again, nor that E3 that really took that hit back, I guess, a week or so ago. That one's not, I don't think you're putting Humpty Dumpty back together again after that one. So that's a quick round for today. Again, this thing, it seems to have settled down just a little bit, but with the negotiations not progressing and basically having two parties depart, that doesn't feel like a great sign. So we'll see how this one goes. Let me know what you think, and I'll see you next time.